Okay, we still have people joining, but let's get started because we have a very packed and interesting agenda for the day. So welcome everyone to another Data Europa Academy webinar. In this webinar, we wanted to pay tribute to the European Cybersecurity Awareness. So as you know, this is the European Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So this month is to promote the importance of cybersecurity across citizens, organizations, private companies, and to provide also tools to tackle cybersecurity threats. As you know, on data.europa.eu, we work on open data initiatives, on data sharing policies, and we saw that there's a growing importance on this topic, and it's very important and high on the agenda. But there are still some challenges of securing this information, and it has become a significant concern. Can we actually open up the data, publishing it while keeping cybersecurity in our organization? That's why open data may introduce some risks related to data breaches, privacy violations, or other cybersecurity threats. Here, in this context, data providers, the public sector, especially publishing on data.europa.eu, we find that they have to navigate this paradox, no, of making data available and open to the public while ensuring that it remains protected from misuse or any kind of malicious intent. So today we're going to talk about that, open data and cybersecurity data protection. And we count with speakers, with experts on the topic for that on cybersecurity. So this webinar, this aims is to address these challenges, especially for data providers, but it can serve as an inspiration for other data users here, and also to raise awareness about these cybersecurity risks, equipping you with some tools and some knowledge to mitigate them. So I hope you enjoy it. Before we start, as you know, we have some rules of the game. So this webinar will be recorded and it will be published on the Data Europa Academy. That is the learning hub that we have available for everyone on data.europa.eu. For questions, as you see, there is a specific chat where you please feel free to drop your questions. They will not be addressed while we're presenting because there will be a specific part for the Q&A to discuss with the speakers on your questions and reply to them. And then the third point, your opinion is very important to us to improve and to see how we can make better trainings in the future for you. So at the end of the session, there will be 3 minutes of 3 minutes of feedback that we really would like you to fill it in so we can take it into consideration for the future. Having said this, I'm going to introduce myself and also to the speakers that we have today. So my name is Ima Farfan Velasco. You may have seen me in other webinars. So I'm project manager working at the Publications Office of the European Union, part of the European Commission. And I manage the Data Europa Academy, the learning hub that is organizing these events. And today I'm together with our cybersecurity experts that we very much look forward to listen to. So we have Roland de Koning, so he's director on public security in Capgemini Invent. We also have Amanda Brinkant. So she's cyber management consultant specialized in cybersecurity from Capgemini. So we will have this scope from the private sector, but we also have experts from a new agency, in this case, the European Union Agency for Cybersecurity. So we count with Prokopios Drokaris, who is the Deputy Data Protection Officer. So welcome the three of you to this webinar, and we thank you very much for your time today. So to walk you very quickly through the agenda, after this brief introduction, we will start with safeguarding open data by Roland de Koning and Amanda Brinkant, who will speak and introduce this topic that I was previously mentioning. That will be followed by Prokopios, who will speak about how to strike the balance between open data and data protection, followed by our question and answer session. Having said this, I give the floor to Amanda Brink and Roland Koning. Thank you very much, and the floor is yours.
Well, good morning. Thank you very much for this nice introduction, and it's a pleasure to be in this webinar and share some experience and knowledge of us on cybersecurity, and especially focused on cybersecurity and safeguarding open data. We'd like to take you in this webinar in our thoughts in understanding the risks and balancing openness in cybersecurity. I will start this webinar, and Amanda will take a few important slides in this, and then I will be closing it as well. We have a short agenda for this agenda where we want to address the paradox of openness and security in sharing data. As said, we want to give some insight into the threats to open data, and go into a specific case on disinformation when things go wrong. Concluding the dilemma of navigating the data publishing dilemma, and going into the topic of responsible data sharing. That, having said that, I'd like to start with the first picture that I want to show you, and I want to ask the audience, what do you see? Because what you see is a nice, beautiful picture based on open data. So I'd like to invite you. Okay, can you give something of your thoughts of what do you see here? You can use the chat for that. Just giving a few moments of thought, which in fact is a really beautiful picture from my point of view.
We have quite a few thoughts in the chat.
It's going very quickly, yeah. And I think, yeah, there are some good things here. I saw ship trafficking coming by, and indeed, that's true. These pictures are made of visualizing ship movements using AIS data that transponders send out of all the ship movements in the world, and using that data creates beautiful pictures. So first to say open data is beautiful. So that would be my first statement, actually. And if you, well, we are together with the community of people who are specialists in open data or interested in open data. So we know what open data is. Open data is data that anyone can access, use, share. Governments, businesses, and individuals can use open data to bring about social, economic, and environmental benefits. And looking at the open data portal, we see some high-value data sets that are really important and critical for numerous services, and really needs to protect, whether it is weather and climate-related data, or data related to locations and maps and geographical features, whether we look at satellite imagery and environmental data such as air quality and land use, statistics, aggregate data on demographics and economics, company information such as registration details and financials, or information about transportation data, including traffic flows and public transit schedules. All these data is extremely important for the public, and is available, and somehow needs to be protected. And that brings us to the dilemma of these sessions about openness and cybersecurity. Can we have both? That's the question. It sounds like a tricky one. It sounds like a contradiction, because open data gives access to public information. It helps to make governments more transparent, provides evidence that public money is being well spent and policies are being implemented. Open data is opening opportunities for businesses to connect with customers, and it helps eventually to protect our planet by providing all kind of detailed early warnings. And that is something that we want to protect. Although it is open, we want to prevent this vulnerable data from tampering and unauthorized access and misuse. And that, well, the essential is to protect the integrity and the confidentiality of those data sets. So to ensure trust and accuracy and the continued usability of those data sets. So can we have both? Have it open and have it secure? That's the big question of this webinar. It sounds like a contradiction, but I'd like to introduce something that people who are familiar with security know. It's called the CIA, the Cybersecurity Triangle. How can something be open and secure? Think about the Cybersecurity Triangle, where confidentiality, integrity, and availability holds together the security of data. For open data, you just need to drop the C, one can say. And then talk about availability and integrity. Whether that's the case, I think that's the question for this webinar as well. But let's first take those first two, availability and integrity. These are two essential elements of keeping open data secure. Can I trust the open data that I'm downloading from an open data portal? Is data.europa.eu who they say they are? Or am I browsing a Chinese website? Or was the data fiddled by a hostile agent, or is any fake data injected? If I use data, will I calculate something wrong, or that will influence how I make decisions, and the decisions will be wrong and damage me? These are questions about integrity and needs to be taken into account to secure the open data. If we look at the availability aspect, for open data, we should ask the question, can I count on 24/7 availability of data sets and be dependent on for key processes? If not, what would be the availability, and how often is it offline for updates or any other reasons? And what happens if someone attacks the server with live open data describing the Netherlands road systems and it goes down? Will the ambulance find my uncle who just got a heart attack, or get they stuck in the middle of Amsterdam? Crucial is the availability of data, and make sure that it is in order to keep open data secure. So, as said, first of all, we need to focus on, for open data, on availability and integrity, but confidentiality is also a very important element, which I want to come back later in this presentation. Let's, for now, first have a look at the threats of open data. And for that, I'd like to give the floor to Amanda.
Thanks a lot, Roland, and good morning to you all. Nice to be here with you today, virtually, of course. So indeed, I'm going to delve into the threats of open data in the next few slides. And of course, we cannot do that without citing ENISA, which has done a lot of research in regards to threat landscapes. And we have used the threat landscape 2024 as a basis to really outline the most prominent cybersecurity risks in regards to open data. And ENISA does this by categorizing threats based on the stages of exploitation, so at what point of the attack this occurs, as well as broader trends. So I use the word threat actor within the slides on purpose, because it encompasses all kinds of actors that could be a threat to open data. So that refers to an individual or group that poses a potential risk to an organization, to a system, or to an individual. And you can think of cyber criminals, hacktivists, nation states, insider threats, and also script kiddies. And in the next 2 slides, I'll actually be dividing these tactics into what we call pre and post exploitation. So the ones on this slide are actually pre-exploitation. And that refers to when threat actors actually target data during the preparation or release. And they twist this information before it actually reaches the public, right? So this is not an exhaustive list. There are many threats out there, but we want to keep it to the key threats within this presentation. We'll also not delve into the full technical parts of it, but keep it more strategic and understandable. So the first one we talk about is supply chain targeting. And this is where threat actors actually are hiding harmful codes in popular open data projects. And this can sometimes be quietly added to larger systems, hence the supply chain reference over there. And once this is used in post-exploitation, this can be quite dangerous, as this code can steal or change important data. And since these issues can go unnoticed for quite some time, especially with nation-state actors who tend to be in systems for quite a longer time over a cyber criminal, for example, looking for a quick win. It's crucial to keep an open eye on open source tools and also improve their security throughout. Then that takes us to our information manipulation. So our second one over here, and that is when threat actors can exploit the transparency of open data initiatives, also relating to what Roland was talking about in our previous slide. And they can do that by introducing false values, for example, or reshaping the data narrative. And this manipulation does occur and is done before the data actually reaches the end users, which can distort facts, for example, and also mislead the public, depending on what kind of information is being altered over there. So these actions can undermine credibility of open data sources, which can, of course, erode public trust and also create confusion around certain information that is being shared. And then we move on to data poisoning, maybe one that is a bit more popular for the common eye. But this is where threat actors are actually injecting misleading or incorrect data into data sets that are used for AI training, so artificial intelligence, and by compromising data sources, manipulating data, data collection particularly, or in tampering also with data pipelines. And this tactic contaminates the data, causing AI models to behave in an unpredictable manner. And this can, of course, also produce results that are not accurate anymore or skewed. And the consequences can range from flawed decision-making, for instance, to critical business or even operational failures. And if we then move on to our post-exploitation. So as I talked about previously, post-exploitation occurs when data is actually published. And that's where threat actors would manipulate or misinterpret it to push a misleading narrative, for instance. And in our first attack here, we have data tampering and integrity attacks. That involves actually changing information by hacking into databases, altering files, or even modifying data as it moves between systems, like when it's being sent over the internet, for example, and this can also mislead or disrupt operations. So here you can think of a threat actor that could alter government, public health data, and that can manipulate public perception, potentially influencing, of course, policy decisions and misdirecting resource allocation based on falsified information. Then if we move on to data re-identification, that involves taking anonymized public data sets that are published, and threat actors can actually combine those with other available information that's on the web to uncover identities of individuals, which of course compromises privacy as well as security. And threat actors could cross-reference this data with, for example, social media activity to reconstruct, let's think of commuting patterns, or also looking into surveillance and profiling. Then that takes us to AI manipulation, and that refers to the altering of data sets used for training AI models. And this can lead to biased, also inaccurate outcomes, or even misclassifications. And here you can think of a nation-state actor who is manipulating AI training data sets to skew decisions in critical areas. And you can think of the defense sector, public health, or even law enforcement. Then we move on to sensitive data leakage. And this can be when open data initiatives, accidentally, of course, expose sensitive information. So you can think of health records or personal identifiable information such as emails or names, locations, or employment data, for example. And this can be misused by threat actors and can actually be sold on illicit markets, for example, on the dark web, or even lead to committing identity theft, fraud, or even discrimination, depending on the case. And ENISA emphasizes that as more data is, of course, becoming available, both the sophistication as well as the frequency of these attacks are increasing. So it's something that we also need to be constantly on top of from a security perspective. Now, I want to delve into something perhaps a bit deeper here. But now that we've covered the common tactics of how threat actors can misuse open data, I want to dive into an example of cyber disinformation, which is a tactic that operates both in pre as well as post-exploitation phases. And when threat actors exploit different points in the data cycle, it does make it tougher to counter. So we can think of this information, or it's identified as false or misleading content that is spread, very importantly, with the intention to deceive or secure economic or political gain. And this can cause public harm. The cyber part refers to, in this case, the use of open data to push such narratives. And a clear example of this can be seen by the exacerbated energy crisis that happened in 2022. I'm sure many of you are very familiar with these events. And just to recap that, it's a crisis that was also driven by the war in Ukraine, sanctions in Russian energy, and fragile supply chains that surrounded that, which resulted in severe shortages and also skyrocketing prices across Europe. And unfortunately, disinformation campaigns took advantage of this chaos, manipulating narratives and data as well to create quite some confusion. So on our next slide, we're actually going to see an example of how this was done. So we can see here that there were three main tactics that were used here. So data manipulation, we saw that threat actors actually cherry-picked and altered information about the energy consumption to create false narratives about the energy crisis by exploiting trust in open data initiatives. Then we see through AI, the threat actors leveraged deepfake generators as well as natural processing to create fake articles, infographics, also videos, which falsely depicted a crisis in energy production, or further exacerbated that crisis. And this blurs the line between reality and deception, which of course also makes it harder for the public to discern what is true and what is not. Then with social media, this is further amplified once it was launched through bots and fake accounts on social media platforms, which amplified the impact of these false claims, reaching much wider audiences. So we got some that actually blamed the grid for the instability. Others claimed that governments were using this crisis to push green agendas. So there was quite a lot going around this. And we see that it has caused supply chain disruptions and people panic buying, public anxiety. Of course, citizens were also a bit confused on what was happening there, as well as economic consequences. So we've also seen the crisis induced fluctuations in the stock market and increased energy prices. So cases like this show how open data can be misused. However, there's a lot to also embrace through the power of open data initiatives by being cautious in what we choose to publish. So I'm actually going to pass this to Roland, who will delve a bit deeper into this.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. And well, having seen this kind of cases and these kind of threats, it brings us to navigating the data publishing dilemma, like what should and what shouldn't be shared. Because vulnerable information or high value data sets can be misused and used for all kind of things. And we want to prevent the effects of publishing open data. First of all, we want to protect privacy, safeguarding individual privacy to avoid adverse impact on safety and welfare. We want to prevent market disruption. Governments need to prevent disrupting market mechanisms and ensure competition, for example. For sharing openly, we need to consider the data combination risks. Be cautious of merging data sets that could reveal sensitive or compromising information. And we want to prevent to compromise the safety or security of sensitive assets and services. Of course, we do not want to cause commercial or economic harm to an organization or country, or compromising rights of others, like intellectual property or revealing trade secrets. And last but not least, jeopardize national securities and affecting internal or foreign affairs of a nation. And having said that, I think there are a lot of risks, there are a lot of threats that can be done by can affect open data. But at the same time, we want to share because we see the benefit of it. And therefore, I think one of the first steps is to identify the crown jewel data that you have and making sure that you know what you're sharing and whether you need to protect any critical or sensitive information elements in the data set that you're sharing. Of course, you need to exclude personal and sensitive data to avoid disclosing personal identifiable information to the public. And you must make sure that, well, definitely national security data needs to be protected. And it starts with identification of crown jewels and to be sure of what you are sharing. That brings me to the element of responsible data sharing. And in order to do it responsible, we need to assess openness and security of the data. And for that, we'd like to introduce 6 elements for assessing this openness and security. It starts with identifying the sensitive data. As I said, what are the crown jewels? And take a decision to share a data set of the high valuable or sensitive data. And in order to do that, you need to have some security management procedures in place in order to ensure and manage the controls to keep the shared data secure. Having a framework that will make sure that you do a risk assessment on potential risks for data, and really make a good estimation of the chance and impact of the possibility that a threat occurs. This will give you the ammunition in order to do a proper risk mitigation and put in place the right measures and controls to safeguard the valuable data. And once the decision has been made that you want to share data in an open environment, it is important to have something like a data sharing agreement with the place you are sharing the data. Whether it's yourself or it's any other organization, you need to make sure that you have written down and shared the acceptable ways in terms of what you're going to share, under which conditions, and how long are you going to share it. In order to do this all together, some proper data governance needs to be in place for now and in the future, to make sure that the data that you share fits into your data governance plan. These 6 elements will help to perform responsible data sharing, and one element I'd like to go into a bit further is the element of risk mitigation, because that's always the case. Like, okay, what can you do in order to really make sure that you take away the risk of sharing information? And you can think of elements like removing a subset of data from a shared data set where only the subsets creates a security risk. Or you can think of elements like reducing the precision of information where the precision of location or timing data increases the security risk. Other elements that you can think of is the leveraging of privacy enhancing technologies and using PET technologies like anonymization and pseudonymization to safeguard individual identities in the dataset. That altogether are examples of risk mitigation measures that you can use. One aspect that I didn't address yet, because we are talking about open data, is the monitoring of access and usage. While open data is supposed to be free and open, one could question whether you shouldn't monitor access and usage. And that brings in the accessibility part of the cybersecurity triangle. And if possible, is it possible to do some user registrations and control access of the data that you're publishing? Because we need to encourage responsible sharing and building on the current culture of sharing. But we believe and we think that responsible data sharing is enabled by data governance. And that's on the next slide, indeed. Data governance is important. The significance of data governance, I think, cannot be overstated. It builds in trust in data, and it's a crucial asset in today's data-enabled decision-making. Trustworthy data enhances decision accuracy, it reduces risks, and it fosters compliance with data protection regulations. If you look at data governance, data security is one element of proper data governance. fact, data governance has 4 foundational pillars, as we can see here in this slide: data quality, data security, data management, and data access. And each pillar is pivotal in ensuring open data is and that it is accurate and secure, and it can be effectively used by the public. So I'm looking at the time, and one element that I think is important is that to emphasize in this is that if you look at data security, something to needs to be in place: data quality, ensuring and maintaining the accurate, consistent, and reliable data throughout the life cycle of the sharing of the data, and that requires data management and effective data organization and storage and retrieval of data, making sure that it's properly handled, and also that data is accessed by the proper people and proper authorized people. And while open data is in its nature open to the public, from a data governance perspective, data access is to conclude whether data sharing is beneficial in a controlled environment. Because data access defines roles and permissions, and ensuring data is wider than its origin. And that brings in the element, when data access is important, it brings in the element of data spaces. And when are you going from open data to data spaces? And the interesting thing there is that we can look at the Data Governance Act, because in the Data Governance Act we see some clear guidance on when data spaces are important. It states that that a data space provides an overarching horizontal governance framework for data spaces. It also highlights the need for them to share data in a controlled manner and operate according to applicable policies and law, to make sure that data is protected, cybersecurity is in place, intellectual property rights are respected, and taking care of all the relevant sectoral regulations. Last point, one essential element of data spaces will be the implementation of tools for data pooling and accessing and using shared data. And it gives the instruments of managing access rights and conditions over time. So openly and responsible data sharing can help us in society. And once you make the decision that you want to control access, the instrument of data spaces can be a very interesting way to go further. That is all for me now. Thank you for your attention. Please save your questions for the Q&A that we'll bring in afterwards, after the presentation of our colleague from ENISA.
Thank you all.
Many thanks, Roland and Amanda, for the insightful presentation, and also for giving me a great pass to move on to a different perspective, but still staying within what you said about what should and shouldn't be shared. So hello also from my side, and many thanks to the Data Europa Academy colleagues and especially INMA for the invitation and for being able to address you today. I'm Prokopis Drogaris, working as a cybersecurity expert at ENISA, and I'm also appointed as the Deputy DPO. So given that this presentation is part of the Cybersecurity Month, the motto that perhaps we can make use of is think before you click or think before you share. In terms of sharing, not only the typical sharing between, let's say, social media or with trusted parties, but also making information or datasets available to the outside world, either as open data or for data that cannot be really shared as open data. Roland very nicely presented a recent legal instrument, the Data Governance Act, which sets a framework where data sharing can be performed between parties and still have added value services, so that we can leverage the potential of aggregating data and not having to reinvent the wheel every time. However, when the time comes to share something, we are always in facing the challenge, or we are failing to address all the potential implications with regards to what this data means to us and what it can potentially mean to others, especially if they are able to combine this information with other pieces of information. Just to move a little bit outside the context of open data, imagine if I tell you that my national ID card its number starts with AB. For people, even in Greece, this might not mean anything at all, since I'm of Greek nationality and therefore I possess a Greek national ID card. For some, it might say something, but for a small percentage of where this identity card was issued. Moving onwards to another example, recently discussing in one of the events that ENISA organized in Sweden, the fact that in Sweden, under the principle and the overarching approach of transparency, there is a public registry available where I can look up all the license plates of the cars I see on the street, and I can pull information about the owners of the car, and then through other platforms collect information about their address and things like that. This is a different concept, not related to open data. I'm not saying it's illegal. It's a practice already followed in Sweden. What I'm trying to say here is that within a specific context, a specific piece of data or information might mean something or not, and if combined with other pieces of information might again mean something to a specific individual, or might reveal information about another individual or not. So moving onwards on what should and shouldn't be shared. Further to the strategic objectives of ENISA that you can see here, the one that we are currently, this presentation is based on, has to do with cyber security policy, on supporting EU policies, mainly on the Data Governance Act, and also cybersecurity aspects of Union privacy and data protection law. So when assuming that we have a data set of all ENISA employees, and we want to distribute as open data this data set, and the first logical assumption would be, okay, but let's remove the first and the last name. Let's leave the date of birth so that people processing this data set can identify roughly the average age of ENISA staff and perhaps their country of origin. This would be an attempt to pseudonymize the data before making it publicly available. Here you can see the definition of pseudonymization according to GDPR, which states that the data subject cannot be longer attributed, the data cannot be longer attributed to a data subject without the use of additional information. So by deducting the first and the last name, we might have assumed that we have pseudonymized the data set, as nobody can really identify who, which individuals are included in the data set. However, if there is, let's say, only one colleague that you can find on LinkedIn that works from ENISA and comes from Cyprus or Malta, then this dataset is not really pseudonymized, even if we omitted the first and the last name. When we released this dataset and you see Cyprus, you can very easily look up on LinkedIn or in other platforms and perhaps source the information that this must be the person that works for ENISA and is mentioned here. And further to that, you might be also able to source additional information that have also been released within this data set. And we assumed it was anonymous when in case it was not, because what we did was to pseudonymize the data set and not very good, and not anonymize the data set. Now, in terms of anonymization, the definition of anonymization does not exist in the GDPR. It's only included in the recital, since pseudonymized data differ from anonymized data, and anonymized data do not fall under the scope of the GDPR. And this is because the notion of anonymous data is that you cannot really, it is impossible to identify individuals, so they are not personal data anymore. So the common misperception that I presented earlier with regards to ENISA as an example, if we remove direct identifiers from a data set, then our data set is anonymized. And as I very easily discuss, unfortunately, this is not the case because of the so-called indirect identifiers or additional information that might help you identify with a certain probability someone. Of course, this on paper sounds very logic and makes sense. However, it's not only on paper. You might have witnessed back in 2006 when Netflix was attempting to improve their rating algorithm. They have launched a Netflix prize as an open data set, removing identifiers and names of individuals, so that researchers, community, everybody interested could propose a better rating algorithm for Netflix, and in return, they would get a certain amount of money. Open data, based on data produced by Netflix or processed by Netflix, were released as open data for researchers, for the community, in order to develop an algorithm. And some researchers, what did they do? They took this data set and combining it with information from the IMDb, an open platform where users could rate movies, TV series, whatever shows. They were able to identify with a specific, a rather high probability, which were the users from the data set that Netflix had released. So the problem here is that Netflix or whoever released the initial data set did not really think of other pieces of information that would already be available on the internet and could combined and process allowed for the re-identification of individuals included in the initial dataset. And think of this not only from the data protection point of view, but also from confidential or business sensitive pieces of information. How well a specific car part is performing, or how long it can last. Attempting to depict in our minds an analogy with the Netflix case, again, without revealing exactly this information, and again, we're not talking for personal data here, it could be the case that by combining additional information, we could reach to the point where the information that we initially wanted to protect is being revealed. And even if anonymization by definition is meant to be reversible, even within an EU regulation of 2018, there is already the notion of de-anonymizing data. And this is because, at least to my reading, due to the fact that we cannot really control the other data sets that will be publicly available, or the additional contextual information that might become available, if they are not really now, in the future, and they might constitute our data set reversible in terms of revealing what we really wanted to protect. This is not to scare and say, look, open data does not work. On the contrary, at the European level, we have identified the added value services that can be offered by sharing information, either as open data or through mechanisms as those imposed and prescribed in the Data Governance Act. However, we need to be very careful when taking a data set and considering it as irreversible with regards to what we want to protect. And some mechanisms with regards to doing that, mainly for personal data, as Roland mentioned also earlier, it's anonymization. There are specific techniques that are supposed to guarantee a specific level of anonymization or pseudonymization. I'm saying supposed because it also depends on how we develop and implement this technique in practice. And also data masking and privacy preserving computations. So out of the list of privacy enhancing technologies that you can see in this slide, based on a very broad categorization that we have attempted in 2022 at ENISA. Not all of them are meant to support data sharing. However, they can support or sharing as open data. However, some of them can support in specific instances. And moving on to why I talked about engineering, let's take another rather relevant example, the one of encryption. We always think and consider that encryption is the best thing that has happened to us with regards to confidentiality of our sensitive data, sensitive business data, or sensitive personal data, or personal data in general. So we deploy it without really reviewing what is the algorithm as a state of the art currently. What is the key length that we should use? Where should we store the encryption key? How do we monitor who had access and who really used this encryption key? So it's not about only deploying a specific technique as one off-the-shelf solution, but rather going towards the whole engineering approach, understanding what are we trying to achieve, how each privacy enhancing technology or each technique in general can support us in towards achieving our goal. What are the deployment, implementation, and configuration and maintenance steps that we need to take in order to achieve our goal and continue having it achieved in the near future? And in order to be able to engineer this, there is also the aspect of the human element and the cybersecurity skills gap shortage that has been identified in the last couple of years. Last year was the year of skills, and which are the people that know how to do this in practice, identify what needs to be protected, what needs to be not to be shared, and which are the relevant techniques, how to apply them, how to deploy them, and how to maintain them. And this is where the ENISA cybersecurity skills framework and its 12 profiles can perhaps come in hand. Here you can see the 12 profiles as identified and put forward by NISA with regards to cybersecurity, and some elements of these profiles can definitely fit within the skills of engineering that we want to see in the future in order to being able to take right decision, what can be shared, what can be shared, what is at risk when sharing something, how to make sure that what we share would not reveal additional information that than the information that we initially wanted to share. Of course, there is no specific profile for this specific activity, as these profiles are meant to include and are including specific skill sets that each one of them can afterwards be combined and create additional sub profiles or additional subset of skills. So in this case, for open data, on the top of my mind, and we have really given it any deeper thought, I would assume that the cyber legal policy and compliance officer, some of the skills from this profile, together with the cybersecurity implementer of the second row and the cybersecurity risk manager, could be the ones that combined could develop the skill set that we would be looking in order to create a data set based on the decision, based on the initial question, what can be shared and what shouldn't be shared. Having said that, I would like to conclude by saying that uh, the reason for starting and discussing the possible risks that could emerge with regards to the confidentiality or the data that are being shared has to do with raising awareness on what we need to know and what we need to understand as obligatory to be protected, and also the fact that cybersecurity elements, cybersecurity and data protection or privacy of data are closely related, since cybersecurity is an integral part of data protection and the legal obligation. And practically, most of the data sets that we would like to make available inevitably would contain some pieces of information regarding data subject. Of course, there can be a specific case, as I mentioned earlier, about confidential information that does not include personal data. However, in the majority of the cases, the added value services that we are really want to offer at the end of the day, at least to my understanding and to my knowledge, will eventually include details about individuals, because the added value of these services is usually meant to make our lives easier, and to offer added value services. Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure, and as Roland and Amanda said, I will look forward to the discussion afterwards.
Well, thank you very much, Prokopios, Roland, and Amanda, for these great presentations. Actually, give us a lot of food for thought, because we saw how we smoothly went like from the cybersecurity risk and threats, like in the whole process of opening up and disseminating data. So we could actually see what there are the specific threats and risks to take it into consideration. And then with Prokopius, we zoom in into the part of more data protection, the importance of pseudomization, anonymization of the data, but also about the skills, because somehow we see that there's like a growing interest on people building up the necessary skills on cybersecurity. So thank you so much for bringing all of this together. And I also have some questions myself from the from your interventions, but I saw that we already had a lot of questions from the chat, so let's jump directly through them. Yes, so well, I think that it was very interesting when we were also mentioning the Data Governance Act, no? Because we see that there are these legislative and policy initiatives that are working on opening up the data, but it's true that we talk about different levels of openness, right? We have the European Register for Protected Data. We have these data spaces that are going to have different level of accesses, not directly publishing it on an open data portal as we have data.europa.eu. So we see that there are different type of initiatives trying to leverage from that, but at the same time trying to secure this data. So there was one question from Lenka. Okay, first of all, before we get started, I will address these questions to any of you according to when the question was placed. But please, if you would like any of you to intervene or jump in to express your opinion, please feel free. Let's try to make this conversation as open as possible, although we're here in this online context and not face to face. So we had the first question from Lenka, that is on what is an effective way to consider data combination risks. There are always possibilities that we could not see at the beginning when opening up the data. So this is more on the processing, I guess, and on the preliminary steps of opening up the data. So Roland or Amanda, if you would like to reply to this question from Lenka, please.
Yeah, if you want, Roland, I can chime in on this.
Go
Thanks
ahead.
for the question. I think it's a really good one, actually, because indeed it's not the easiest to foresee. But I think you can do this by a few different ways. So you can limit the data collection to, for example, what is really necessary. You can also conduct a data impact assessment. That's more from a security standpoint, to really evaluate, for example, what are the privacy as well as the security risks concerned over there. You can also, as Roland mentioned in the presentation, also Trocares, implement more robust data governance. And that includes more on the policies, also the anonymization techniques mentioned today, that can actually protect individuals' identities. Then you can also conduct audits, for example, and try to get more stakeholder engagement, to also help identify and mitigate any emerging risks that can occur from the data that is published. But maybe there are also other suggestions from our panel here, so I'll leave that open now.
Well, I think you already addressed quite a few elements in this. And at the same time, I also think that the combination, data combination risk cannot fully be taken away, because you don't know what you don't know yet. And the fact that if someone is very creative and has the possibility to combine all kind of data sets, there might pop up some intelligence that wasn't there. So I think being aware of that risk, that's I think already the first step, and think before you share is kind of the most important element in this, I think.
Thank you so much. We also had a very interesting discussion in the chat about whether data, open data in this case, should have registration or not registration. Actually, there were different opinions on this respect, because some people may be surprised, for example, that you don't need user registration to just download data. But other people may think the contrary in this case, that why should I be registered to accessing open data, no? So this is like a more open discussion, because it's true that the original principle of open data is that it should be open by default to access distributed. So putting the layer of accessing it by registration can be considered that actually you are protecting a bit more the data, so it's not fully open data. So what is your view here? I don't think there's like a personally, because I would also like to intervene here, I don't think there's a yes or no reply. It really depends. But I would also like to hear from you. So we can start, if you want, with Prokopios.
Yes, many thanks, Inma. Again, on a personal level, I could see some benefits and drawbacks. So indeed, in theory, it contradicts the principle of openness of the open data. However, in fact, it could prove as a useful measure in terms of, let's say, providing an updated version. So perhaps enhancing the communication and the collaboration between the provider of the data and the consumer, and vice versa, of course, in case of additional inquiries, or look what I found, look what I'm missing here, perhaps we could work a little bit further on that. What I would like to pass as a message is it depends on why we are posing this additional step in the whole process. What is the reasoning behind this? In my mind, in terms of auditing who accessed it, might make sense. However, I don't really see it as very effective, since they could do whatever they want with the data, or I could ask my daughter, my mother, or whoever to access the data on behalf of me and then post it on dark web. So we should, if this is the case and we really want to know who accesses the data, then perhaps we shouldn't be talking about open data, but perhaps about a data space. So
Mhm.
this is why I said that the message I would like to pass is what is the reason behind it. If we are unsure about what will happen to our data, perhaps the context of open data is not the right for us, is not the right context for us.
I see. I see. Yeah, I think the reasoning, the part of the reasoning why it's important to do that, not doing it by default, is also important. Amanda, Roland, would you like to intervene on this one?
Yeah, I would like to say something from a security point of view, and being a security professional, always risk averse, and then I'd like to have everything controlled. And at the same time, I think the concept of open data is about data that is from the public, by the public, created by the public. So there, I think everything that you can see when you walk on the street is kind of form of data that's accessible. So from that point of view, I would say you don't want to have anything like access control. But from a security professional point of view, I always want to control it. I would want to control it. So, and that's I think the dilemma in this, and that I think you need to, need to think carefully. What would be the risk of a specific data set and opening up completely, or putting some controls in it, or some
Yeah.
monitoring tools for it.
Yeah, I see your point. I think that it's also, apart from the reasoning, is how is going to be this data of the registration used. For example, I mean, thinking about or the data.europa.eu, we don't have this registration to access to this data. But I would think that some people would want this to get more information from the user, because if you get to know more your users, then you know where to put the resources that you have as a portal, for example, to enrich the data, or to focus more your priorities, basically. So, but it really depends on how it is going to be used.
Yeah, then it's more a point of service than
Mhm.
it's a point of controlling.
Indeed, indeed.
Yeah. Nice.
So there was another question, more precisely about tokens. I don't personally have an experience with this one. Maybe you can help me with this. So why is this? Why there are some open data platforms that have access with tokens? Do you have experience with? I mean, since you work with different organizations and enterprises, have you seen this in the past, and how is why they're using these tokens? Why do you think they are really necessary, or what is your opinion on that? I don't know, Amanda, if you would like to kick it off.
Yeah, I actually personally haven't seen these tokens yet, so I'm not sure if maybe there's another wording for them or another term. I don't know if any of our other speakers have.
My my mind goes to interoperability between APIs and tokens. Perhaps this
Mhm.
is what they meant, unless they meant something about cookies. So tracking, similar to cookies, tracking whoever got access or whoever is authorized to receive access, which in the case of an API, this is very broadly speaking and very roughly put what the token is used for. I guess it relates back to the previous discussion point with regards to knowing who accessed the data set that is being published as open data.
Good. Indeed. There was another question. It was more on what to do in this specific case. So, for example, if there is a user doing some search on a EU website, for example, to download documents, they were asking whether this information of this account is going to be available and stored by the basically the institution or the company in this case working in the IT department. I personally, in this specific context, I would think that it depends for the purpose, but I guess there should be also in each website, for example, a specific notice explaining what they're doing with your personal data. This is the way we also proceed on the Open Data Portal. So we have a specific legal notice where we explain specifically in which way your information, personal information, is used, and to also offer you the legal tools in case you would like this data not to be used. But in case you would like to also intervene on this one, any of you?
Indeed, this goes towards the e-privacy directive and the draft regulation and the cookies. It's a chicken and egg problem. So this webinar is being recorded and will be made available afterwards. Of course, there is no real point to know exactly if Roland, Amanda, or myself will be watching it 10 times per day just to see ourselves again, or ask my family to watch it. However, it is very useful for Inma and her colleagues to be able to see that this webinar got X views and another one got twice as many views or less than half of the views of this video. So identify a little bit the trend and what is interesting to the audience within a period of 6 months. We have a similar situation at Enisa's website with the deliverables. So further to the technical cookies, which are essential for the operation of the website, there are also some with regards to statistics. And this is where we hide everything, we include everything in a very big basket and say, yes, but these cookies can track me well while I don't want to be tracked. So first of all, we need to offer the possibility to opt in, so agree to be tracked and not the other way around, and also not go for the full package of tracking, but perhaps include a cookie that will live only for 1 day. So it will not, if I see this video every week, it will not really understand that it's me every other week clicking this video. So it's a balance between usability, functionality, and added value, to get into the terminology of the webinar. However, there are also ways in order to avoid the continuous tracking, but order serve the specific purpose, under the caveat that based on the privacy and the GDPR, it should be an opt-in mechanism and not an opt-out, or even worse, an absolutely necessary condition.
Thank you very much. I also would like to say that as a user, when you are joining also when you're providing some information to to a website, you'll always have the right to withdraw and also to change your mind also on sharing this personal information. And I would like to also emphasize that in this discussion, that this is indeed possible. Well, so we had another question from Anaslav. I think this one would be for you, Prokopios. So it's on what cybersecurity measures are essential for protecting open data platforms from the growing threats of hybrid warfare.
Based on the excellent presentation of Amanda and Roland, assuming that we have already taken all the steps spoke about when deciding to share the data, we need to make sure that the data set is not further manipulated through poisoning, through interference, through manipulation. So imagine publishing a data set about a vaccine and then being able to alter the integrity of the data set and including other values than the ones initially becoming available. So even this, again, rather stupid example, but simple, depicts the fact that the value in the data set and in protecting it still remains. It's not like we made it publicly available. Or imagine if I act as an intermediate, so INMA makes available a data set, and I say, okay, but I have enriched it, it's INMA's data set, but I have enriched it with ENISA data as well. So we should be very careful on the source to avoid the misinformation, attempting an analogy, and also make sure that whatever we make available is being accessed like the way we wanted it to be accessed and not after it has been tampered or whatever. I don't want to go into further scenarios because just to give you, because I touched upon the vaccine example, the data set published by Procopio shows that 25 people get here by doing this vaccine. Who is going to analyze the data set? This is a typical misinformation without really going into the data set itself. This is a completely different scenario, not related to the cyber security.
I see. Well, so I think on another matter, I was also a bit surprised, let's say, when we were discussing about all the latest digital developments as well, no? Because we have also artificial intelligence that it's growing and it's going to be and is already in our day-to-day lives. But it seemed by the presentation from you, Roland and Amanda, that it could be a multiplier of cybersecurity threats, no? Because they can really misuse this information to spread fake news or disinformation. So I don't know. I think that after, and this is going on into my like is what was one of my main points that I want to discuss with you. I think that the tools that we can give to people in this case is to get informed, get the right skills to spot these disinformation threats, and to really secure also the organization. In this case, the Data Governance Act, as we were mentioning, is a very important element because it monitors the usage of this data and it creates different type of frameworks. So the data that is shared is in a controlled manner. So, okay, I think that we don't have more questions. So I would like to thank you so much for your time. It was great to have you in this context and discuss more about cybersecurity and open data and see what is the symbiosis relationship between them. So thank you so much. Last but not least, you can have access to our survey to tell us what you thought about this webinar, ways to improve it. And I would also like to bring your attention the next workshop that we have organized on the 25th of October on how to use open data on your research. So we will have more hands-on exercise in which we will use open data and we will guide you through the whole process. So I really encourage you to come. So here you also have the QR code for the feedback. And please, we would like to see whether we should also explore more on the cybersecurity part, on the right skills and open data. But in any case, you know where to find us. So I would like to thank you so much, and especially for the expert speakers we had today on cybersecurity, because we definitely touched a point that we should bear in mind for the future, especially on data sharing. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a nice rest of the day on Friday. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.